For most people, the word forest brings to mind a scene something like this. This is a wild forest, a biological community dominated by trees, but also composed of shrubs, ferns, mosses, and a variety of other living organisms, including animals, birds, insects, and fungi, that all function together harmoniously as a system. What many people do not realize is that most of us who live in cities live in what is called an urban forest. In fact, when one looks out over many cities in North America, one can scarcely see the city for the trees. An urban forest, like a wild forest, is dominated by trees, trees growing both on public property and on private property. It also includes naturally forested areas within the urban boundary. An urban forest also contains vegetation other than trees, for instance, shrubs and vines, both of which play important roles in the urban forest despite their smaller size. It also includes meadows, where wildflowers and grasses create an important habitat for insects and small animals. In addition to plants, animals are very important in the urban forest. Some animals, such as birds and squirrels, are very familiar to most of us, while others, such as the nocturnal beaver, are seldom seen. But as common as some of these animals are, and as important as their roles are, there is one animal that is more important than the rest in helping to maintain the urban forest, and that animal is you. The urban forest means different things to different people. For some people, it's reassuring to live among the largest and longest-lived organisms that ever inhabited our planet. For others, trees are mere decorations, such as these illuminated lindens atop a skyscraper. Some people even try to camouflage their autos with trees. Still other people see trees as nuisances, as they always need to be picked up after. Despite the different views people have of trees, the urban forest provides the entire community with a host of important benefits. Trees play an important aesthetic and psychological role, beautifying our communities and providing a changing palette of colors through the seasons. But in addition to their aesthetic role, they play a number of other roles which help maintain a community's health. One of the most important roles played by trees and other vegetation is their environmental role. By shading streets and neighborhoods, trees help reduce glare and also help reduce urban temperatures. Even more importantly, large trees act as giant air conditioners by transpiring hundreds of liters of water daily through pores in their leaves. By cooling the air, trees help reduce energy consumption in summer. And in winter, their canopies decrease the cooling effects of wind, so we need less energy to heat our buildings. Moreover, the thousands of leaves on a large tree collect enormous amounts of dust and pollen and dirt that would otherwise circulate in the air around us. And as vegetation photosynthesizes, it gives off oxygen while storing up the carbon dioxide produced by burning fossil fuels and incorporates that carbon into its wood. Trees also provide a variety of economic benefits. A house surrounded by mature, healthy trees has a higher market value than a similar house without trees. And a community with a healthy, extensive urban forest is more likely to attract businesses and people to ensure the community's continuing economic health. Another role of trees in urban areas is their ecological role. Trees, especially those native to an area, function in maintaining the ecological balance because of their interrelationships with other living organisms such as animals, insects, and other plants. Exotic or non-native trees and other vegetation are less likely to play important ecological roles in an urban forest simply because they were generally brought in from afar and are not accompanied by the other living organisms with which they evolved and on which they depend. In view of these many benefits that trees provide, it's sometimes difficult to understand why we mistreat these magnificent plants on which both our personal health and our community's health are so dependent. Although it's sometimes necessary to remove trees that are dying or are decayed, trees are often removed for reasons that are more difficult to substantiate. In the average U.S. city, 4 trees are removed for every one that is planted. For many people who live in areas that are naturally forested, the clearing of such areas during development represents an enormous loss. As important as these losses are, however, there are a variety of somewhat more subtle threats to our urban forest. The topping of trees is an unacceptable practice that endangers the health of the tree by allowing fungi to enter the tree through large wounds caused by topping. By weakening the tree, we also endanger people, buildings, and vehicles in that tree's vicinity. Furthermore, topping jeopardizes community health by diminishing the extent of the green canopy that trees provide for us. And lastly, it sets a bad example for others who might get the idea that topping is the correct way to prune a tree. In fact, many communities forbid the topping of trees growing in the public right-of-way, and some even outlaw this archaic practice on private property as well. The presence of electrical distribution lines requires in some instances that trees, such as these beheaded giant sequoias, be topped to prevent interference with the lines. In the event that the lines cannot be put underground, it's still possible to have both the lines and the trees, as demonstrated by this giant sequoia. Otherwise, trees whose mature canopy will be below the lines need to be planted. A somewhat more subtle threat to our urban forest comes through bottoming. The trees on both sides of this avenue were identical until sidewalk and curb reconstruction occurred on the left. This photo, taken only 2 years later, shows the dying trees due to roots that were severed during construction activities. When working in the vicinity of established trees, we need to recognize the fact that most of a tree's roots are found in the top foot or two of soil, because that's where the most oxygen and also the greatest amount of biological activity are. Even on deep, well-drained soils, older trees have very few roots that are deeper than 2 or 3 feet. Tree roots can be damaged in a variety of ways. By severing them, the tree's ability to obtain water and elements from the soil is significantly reduced. By compacting the soil within a tree's root zone, oxygen is driven from the soil and the penetration of water is impeded, both of which have detrimental effects on tree health. Changing the soil grade around existing trees by more than a few inches suffocates the roots. Here, where almost 2 feet of soil have been graded over the root zone of existing oak trees, the trees are doomed. Sometimes we see an effort made to maintain the existing grade right next to the tree's trunk while piling soil over the rest of the root zone. The effect is the same. This scene is altogether too common at construction sites. The yellow ribbon hanging in the tree's lower branches indicates that this tree was to be preserved during construction. Despite what seem to have been good intentions, the prognosis for this tree's survival is poor. And on forested sites that are cleared to permit development, the damage both to root zones and to tree bark is often enormous, so that the trees which were to provide shade and beauty for the future homes die after the development is completed and must be removed at considerable expense. An unusually thin tree canopy or crown often indicates damage to the root zone that occurred sometime in the past. Some trees, such as this Douglas fir, may take a decade or more to die. In the meantime, they become more of a liability than an asset as their root system weakens and the risk of toppling increases. However, in some cases, the damage is so severe that the trees respond within months. The roots of these northern red oaks were killed due primarily to soil compaction during the construction of the nearby building and bus stop and must now be removed. Unfortunately, replanting with new trees will be futile as well due to the destruction of the existing soil. Here, a 300-year-old California black oak that was, quote, saved, unquote, when a new street was put in, is on its last legs just 3 years after construction. Even when new trees are planted after construction is completed, their vigor, or the lack of it, is indicative of the soil they were planted in. These hornbeams were all planted at the same time, and less than 10 years later show a marked difference in health, the dying ones having been planted in the worst areas. With just a little experience, one is able to quickly determine the likely cause of trees' ill health. With the exception of the tree on the right, these southern magnolias are all dying due to poor soil. The threats to urban trees are many, as demonstrated. Because of the way we've often built our cities in the past, trees are relegated to inadequate holes in the sidewalks, while streets and the sidewalks themselves must meet city codes for width and proper construction. In addition, parking lot runoff sometimes flows right onto tree lawns, carrying with it oil and other toxic substances poisonous to tree roots. Lastly, the spreading of rock salt in winter to de-ice sidewalks can end up damaging adjacent trees. Given the variety and scale of the threats to our urban forest, it might seem overwhelming to consider trying to improve the situation, yet there's much that we can do to change things. Many of us have grown up in a society that sees nature as something to be controlled, especially in a civilization where there sometimes seems to be so little we can really control. We tend to take out our frustration on the plants that surround us. We top our trees, prune our shrubs into balls, apply all manner of pesticides to our lawns and shrubs to keep them perfect and ensure that everything looks tidy and under control. Yet such gardens are rather bleak visually, and some are almost biologically sterile. Few birds sing here, animals can't find any cover from predators, and the earthworms, if there are any, are laced with toxins. To some people, this garden may appear a bit less tidy than the previous two slides, but it is alive. With relatively few kinds of plants, a completely different result is obtained. Here, too, this house blends well with its landscape. The driveway of grasscrete or green block is nearly invisible, and a thoughtful selection of trees, shrubs, vines, and ground covers provide a variety of habitats for all kinds of birds, beneficial insects, and other creatures so necessary to the overall health of our urban forest. The changes we need to make in order to rehabilitate our urban forest can begin right in our own backyards or front yards. By taking responsibility for caring for the small piece of ground surrounding your home, you can make an important statement about how you believe you fit into the urban forest. Once you've begun at home, get together with friends who feel like you do. Learn all you can about your urban forest by attending walking tours that describe what's living around you. Children respond readily to information about trees and other living things, and they'll spread the words to their friends and families. Select a spot in your neighborhood that's barren of trees and get together with friends and neighbors to prepare the site and plant trees that will, over time, become your legacy for future generations. If you live in an area where conifers do well, help organize a living Christmas tree project that not only provides trees for holiday enjoyment, but ensures that those trees will be planted on public property where they'll grow and provide community benefits for many years to come. Even small hands and tiny shovels can make a big difference. Planting trees around schools demonstrates that we care not only for our community's environment, but also for our children's environment. And where you see construction activity occurring in the vicinity of established trees, alert city officials or private contractors to the needs of those trees if they are truly going to be saved. Although manicured lawns are important in some public parks and private gardens, there are also many areas where mowing is really not necessary and is in fact a big waste of time, money, and fossil fuels. Consider the few benefits that this area would have provided were it constantly mowed instead of being permitted to grow into a colorful, productive meadow. Express your concern to city officials and neighbors. Talk with city employees and friends about the effects of their actions on community health. Stand up for lawns studded with flowers as opposed to those reeking from herbicides. Here, a local utility has turned what had been an unsightly maintenance headache into a carpet of wildflowers. They deserve a letter of congratulations from us and a request that the program be extended to other areas. Here, a group of citizens got together and declared part of a large park a no-mow zone to help provide essential wildlife habitat near a small creek, and also to help reduce the amount of mowing city crews must do. Once we understand the enormous benefits provided at extremely low cost by our urban forest, we'll begin to look somewhat differently at protecting, maintaining, and improving it. Perhaps we'll see the beauty in a street gutter filled with cherry leaves and be reminded of the roles those leaves played during the previous growing season. And instead of seeing the maintenance of our urban forest as something awful that someone else should have to do, preferably at no cost to us, maybe we'll see it as a very small price to pay to ensure that our health and that of our community is continually improved. Because, after all, what's good for the urban forest is good for us. We're all in this together.